The Berserk lore is so vast and multivariate that we tend to forget about all the little details that Mira has planted in there for us to contemplate and research on our own time. Daiba is one character of note who offers a great deal of perspective on the psychology/spirituality of man. Now, Daiba is quite the anomaly in the Berserk canon. Whereas most characters are guided by their desires for power, hence the reason for the Baelits, the Kushan sorcerer is focused on attaining a magical kingdom. For what purposes would this magical kingdom exist? Well, I believe we can deduce this answer by understanding the importance of the powerful astral water serpent that he summons in chapter 272, the Kundalini. To understand the concepts of the Kundalini and Kundalini Yoga, we must read the Upanishads, which are philosophical texts found within the Vedas. And it's not too surprising that this information trickled down to Western philosophers as well. Two people of note, Arthur Schopenhauer and Friedrich Nietzsche, were inspired by these writings, with the former stating, "In the whole world, there is no study so beneficial and so elevating as that of the Upanishads. It has been the solace of my life, and it will be the solace of my death." Though Nietzsche would later gravitate away from the Buddhist/Hindu thought due to his eventual disdain for Schopenhauer and the decadent/nihilistic aspects of religion in general as he saw it, he still did favor Buddhism over Christianity for its realistic applications of moving beyond self-deception of good versus evil. Carl Jung went further into the importance of the Upanishads by studying the importance of Kundalini Yoga in confronting what was missing in Western philosophy. The Indians' most important exercise is yoga, an immersion in what we call an unconscious state, but which he praises as the highest consciousness. Kundalini, which means coiled snake, hence the coiled snake hidden within Daiba's water serpent, is a type of yoga that seeks higher forms of consciousness through self-realization. It begins at the base of the spine, which is where the first of 7 chakras is located. When one begins the journey, they exist as the coiled snake at the base of the spine, which indicates there's a disconnect between ego and unconscious. Muladhara, the root chakra, is comprised of things that ground you and provide a stabilizing force. When we think of Guts after the eclipse, the Black Swordsman was a wandering entity that moved from town to town without developing any sort of roots. German psychologist Erik Erikson cited numerous life stages one goes through their psychological development, the first of which being basic trust versus basic mistrust. Typically, one goes through this phase in the first 12 months of life, and depends primarily on how they were raised by their mother. Because Guts had a turbulent childhood in which he was born from a dead woman and was mistreated by Gambino, he lacks the ability to place his trust into others. What made it worse is when he was betrayed by Griffith. Since Griffith was the first person he put his faith in, he was absolutely devastated by what eventually occurred, setting him back for years. Betrayal is always experienced as a loss. What we lose may be our assumptions, it may be our naivete, it may be our insufficiently differentiated way of seeing the world, which requires greater subtlety on our part. Because Guts has an imbalance with his root chakra and struggles to establish camaraderie with others, he experiences frequent living nightmares with the terrors of the night. However, with the introduction of Shirka and the rest of the members, Guts was beginning to allow himself to depend on others. Shirka was a valuable asset that mitigated the beast within, and Serpico was a trustworthy companion who he could rely upon in his fight with Daiba. When one has awoken from Muladhara, one goes into the water, which represents the unconscious, where one faces the Leviathan/crocodile, from the depths, which are one's own demons. There's a lot to unpack from this one statement and how it relates to Guts' personal growth. For one, Guts has woken up from the Muladhara phase by placing his faith in his team, and has thusly gone into the water of his unconscious to initiate the process of self-realization. Before this event, Guts and his crew were at Morgan's village, where he hadn't yet built up the confidence to trust his teammates, and was still a stranger to himself. When Shirka summoned the deluge to wash away the trolls, he was helpless to save Casca and Farnese. Symbolically, he was afraid of entering into the depths of his soul, but his self wouldn't allow him to avoid this challenge forever. Shortly afterwards, they arrived at the sea, and when the crocodiles and Leviathan-like monsters attacked, Guts remarked, "The roar of the sea, it swells blackly from the expanse of the dark night. It draws me down to the deep seabed, a booming like roar. The Leviathan is the biggest and most fearsome creature of the watery depths, but it represents the same animal as the elephant. The one that supports your earthly life seems to become your worst enemy when you reach the next center. because here you leave this world, and anything that hangs around is your worst enemy. It is the water elephant, the whale that eats you, the same that has nurtured and supported you. When one passes through this baptizing, you reach Manipura. After defeating the multiple Leviathan-like creatures at Virtanis Harbor and initiating the uncoiling of the Kundalini upwards by defeating Daiba, Guts, unsurprisingly, enters a boat that eventually takes him to the sea god, and it is there where he is forcibly eaten and is eventually reborn through a baptismal-like event. Watch this previous video I produced for more information. Now let's bring this all together to demonstrate how Guts, much like the individuation process of becoming the self, is ascending the ladder of self-enlightenment through the Kundalini. Upon combining forces with Shirka, Serpko, Farnese, Isidro, and Casca, he created stability and comfort in his life, especially after he defeated the Kundalini, which signified the initiation of his journey upwards. On the boat itself, he opened himself up more and became more sociable and more aware of his senses, which would fade if he failed to combine his instinctual urges with his ego consciousness, possibly resulting in a permanent fissure within his psyche, a case of schizophrenia, if you will. After he defeated the sea god, like Jung stated, he was at the state of Manipura. Ironically, Guts entered the belly of the whale, much like Jonah from the Bible, and was henceforth baptized. It's a transformational stage that is represented by the sun. After they arrive at Elfhelm, Shirka and Farnese repair Casca's broken heart so that she may be more accepting of Guts and express her love once more. Subsequently, she gains the ability of communication once more and was thusly given a floral dress by Danin. Now this dress is important in and of itself, because the throat chakra is represented with 16 purple petals, and the scene in which Casca finally meets Guts displays a cavalcade of petals falling from the trees. The third eye chakra represents the subconscious, and it relays messages from the past and future. Jung remarked that this was the center of the mystic union with God. But in the Ajna center, the psyche grows wings. Here you know you are nothing but psyche. This seems to represent the moment in which Guts visited Hanar and had the vision from 1,000 years ago, in which Skull Knight was separated from his physical body and was thusly left as nothing more than a psyche connected to a suit of armor. But where Skull Knight failed in tempering his own psychological turmoil, Guts still has the opportunity to reconcile the fissure within his mind, to bring the shadow to full awakening and foster a lucid state of mind. Finally, we reach the crown chakra, which permits an experience with God. Sahasrara chakra symbolizes detachment from illusion, an essential element in obtaining supramental consciousness that one is all and all is one. When Griffith entered the deep realms of the astral realm, he encountered God, the idea of evil, and found out that it was the collective consciousness of the human species, born from the dark swells of the ego of this world. Individuation is not that you become an ego, you would then become an individualist. You know, an individualist is a man who did not succeed in individuation. He is a philosophically distilled egoist. This would mean that the apostles and the Godhand members by extension followed the wrong path, remaining within the Muladhara chakra. Muladhara means root, and when we consider this diagram of the world spiral tree sprouting out from the deep roots of the astral realm, we can see this makes sense. Also, when this chakra is imbalanced, one feels greed, cynicism, excessive negativity, and feelings of insecurity. In addition, Muladhara is associated with a red, blood-like flower with 4 petals. One petal represents the greatest joy, another represents natural pleasure, third is delight in controlling passion, and the final one is blissfulness and concentration. We may notice how each Godhand member has perverted this to their own ends. The center is represented by the life force energy that flows freely, and a powerful means of shifting energy throughout the body. With Griffith, he's the only Godhand member who can freely travel through the physical and astral realms. It is also said that the Kundalini sleeps within this square, which we would dub the idea of evil. Now that we've explored the failures of individuation and an inactive Kundalini, what would be the experience with God that I was referring to earlier with Crown Chakra? This would be represented by the Moonlight Boy, a being who emanates pure consciousness and a union with God. In a sense, one is God. In spite of the fact that the snake is not exactly Kundalini, is because the Kundalini Serpent actually dissolves into light. Serpents represent eternity and a renewal of life. the Ouroboros, as it were. As the Kundalini rises upward in your body becomes filled with more light, i.e., more consciousness. The same is said when one follows the individuation process, via utilizing the Christ-like archetype, who is also synonymous with light. Additionally, Christ is likened to a serpent who undergoes a renewal/resurrection, one in which we must all symbolically pass through to attain the coveted enlightenment, the knowledge of the self. The Moonlight Boy contains pure OD, which Flora noticed since he was able to set foot on Elfhelm, and shares a vessel with Griffith, a being of pure malice, in the form of Femto. This combination allows the Moonlight Boy/Griffith to form a union with God, because God is the representation of both good and evil in harmony, in balance. One cannot cut themselves off from their roots or chop off the trunk of the tree if they ever hope to be enlightened. After all, no tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down in hell. And it's very interesting that the Tree of Life, more or less, mimics the Kundalini process of enlightenment, in that they both feature a coiled snake that rises ever higher. And so this is what it was meant by Daiba saying that he wanted his own kingdom, because when one attains a kingdom, they attain a crown. And a crown, in the sense of the Kundalini, means that you've reached the highest level of chakra, which means you've become one with God and you know God, and that's his goal in life, having mastered the water serpent and being able to call upon it at will. Sort of played out in the way of Guts and Casca and the rest of the crew. Their growth is sort of mimicking the Kundalini, the spiritual tree of life. And it's just two sort of ways of watching the growth process manifest itself. So very interesting symbology there by Kentaro Miura. Tell me what you guys think of this video in the comments. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the flip side.